to be able to just make a choice on your own and just be able to speak for yourself.
This one's wife. She knew Andrew before Harry. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Interestingly, presumably as a consequence of there being little news, that a couple of days ago, the Mirror newspaper decided to revisit the past with a headline, "This One's Wife's Awkward Prince Andrew Blunder That Left Prince Harry Perplexed." Now, the news that the Mirror provides us with is not new at all, but what it does provide me with is the opportunity to demonstrate something clear about the relationship between this one's wife and Prince Andrew, born out of her narcissism. The Mirror reports, this one's wife made an awkward blunder after meeting Prince Andrew, with Prince Harry admitting she asked a perplexing question about him. In the early days of their romance, Harry had to introduce this one's wife to all of his royal relatives, including the now King Charles, Prince William and his wife Kate. But this one's wife's biggest meeting came when she was introduced to her now husband's late grandmother, the Queen. But it seemed the meeting left her confused. In the Channel 5 documentary The Battle for Royal Lodge, Andrew versus Charles, experts recount the story that was revealed in Harry's controversial memoir. In it, Harry recalls this one's wife's first meeting with his late grandmother, which came at his Uncle Andrew's home, Royal Lodge, that he shares with ex-wife Sarah Fergie Ferguson, who had to teach this one's wife how to curtsy at the last minute. However, at the end of the get-together, Harry revealed that this one's wife asked a telling question about his uncle, and even thought he might not be a relative. Explaining how the Queen got up to leave after her chat with this one's wife, Harry wrote in spare, "My Uncle Andrew, seated beside her, holding her handbag, began to escort her out. After a moment, Meg asked me something about the Queen's assistant. I asked who she was talking about, when she replied, the man who walked her to the door. The penny dropped for the prince, who realised she had meant Prince Andrew." Now, of course, what's unusual about that is why on earth would this one's wife be asking about the Queen's assistant? Did she regularly do this? Who's that footman over there? Who's that courtier over there? You just wouldn't, would you? So that seems odd of itself. But essentially, what this one's wife was portraying was that she had no idea who Prince Andrew was. Unsurprisingly, that's clearly a lie that has been issued by this one's wife. First of all, we know that she had an interest in the royal family from what her friends have said about her. For example, she had an interest in Diana, that she had posters and that she watched television programs. She had watched royal programs, and there's also the case that she had a photo taken outside of Buckingham Palace. The British royal family are one of the most famous royal families on the planet, and furthermore, we know that this one's wife had a fixation with them, and as a consequence of that, she would have known that one of the Queen's sons was Prince Andrew, and she would have known what he looked like. Generally, almost by osmosis, because of the level of exposure the royal family have, most people would be able to recognise Andrew as Prince Andrew. But it goes further than that. Back in 2012, Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice went to this one's wife's friend Misha Nunu's wedding. And indeed, this one's wife herself admitted in the 2021 Bombshell Oprah interview, Eugenie and I had known each other before I had known Harry, so that was comfortable. Accordingly, if she knew Eugenie, she'll have known who she was, i.e. a princess, and she'll have known that she was the daughter of Prince Andrew. After all, those are the common things that get spoken about when you get to know somebody, and moreover, status matters to the narcissist. Remember, as the social climbing nobody, this one's wife's narcissism wants her to hobnob and fraternize with people of wealth, of fame, of status, because her narcissism can act in a parasitic way with regard to those individuals, whereby, because of her narcissism, she believes that by association with such people, she's one of them, that she's special because she's surrounded by these individuals. Accordingly, she got to know Eugenie, and therefore she must have known about Prince Andrew. Thus, as a consequence of her own interest in the royal family, which has been well documented, and the fact that she knew Eugenie beforehand, she knew full well who Prince Andrew was. Accordingly, if it was clear that she knew who Andrew was before she met him at the Royal Lodge, why did she then act like she didn't know who he was? After all, what would be the problem with admitting that she knows him already? After all, dimwit Harry would expect her to recognise his uncle because he's a famous member of the royal family. And furthermore, even if Harry wasn't aware of this at this point, this one's wife would have known who Andrew was by virtue of her connection with Eugenie. Therefore, the question becomes, it's clear that you knew who Andrew was, therefore why didn't you just admit it? Why did you then ask, who is the Queen's assistant? And it's here where understanding the way that her narcissism works allows us to understand that there was a greater connection between Andrew and this one's wife. There would not have been a problem with admitting that she knew him, either just in general terms, because he's Prince Andrew and famous, or through the connection with Eugenie. That wouldn't pose a problem. But the problem is that she evidently knew him in a way that was intimate. Why? Because that prior involvement had the potential to derail her ensnarement of Harry. Her narcissism, on seeing Andrew, would cause her to remember that they had intimacy previously. And therefore, if that information were to come out, there is little doubt that Harry would have backed away from the relationship with her. Thus, it would derail her ensnarement of him, threaten her control of him, and with all the associated benefits that would come from that. As you know from previous explanations, in essence, her narcissism said jackpot when she ensnared Harry, because not only was he easy to control, but it gave her access to lots of fuel, character traits, and residual benefits, the likes of which she would ordinarily have never achieved on her own. Accordingly, in order to maintain control of Harry, she had to maintain the artifice that she didn't know Andrew. It also demonstrates the simplistic nature of the way that she thinks, because she could as easily have admitted that she knew Andrew by virtue of the fact that she knew about the royal family. But her narcissism saw a clear and present danger as a consequence of prior association, and therefore went to the almost ridiculous state of asking, who was that? Anybody who has heard this anecdote afterwards would go, that's preposterous that she didn't recognise who Prince Andrew is. And indeed, you're right. So therefore, given that it's preposterous, you would have to ask yourself, given that it'd be quite logical for her to know who Prince Andrew was for the reasons that I've already advanced, why would she go so far as to basically not recognise him? And that must be because her narcissism needed to nullify the threat to control that was posed by Andrew's presence. Thus, she ignores him, claiming not to know him, which allows her to nullify the threat to control posed by him, and at the same time allows her to maintain control over Harry, because the ensnarement isn't derailed by basically saying, I've had hanky-panky with your uncle before you. Naturally, Andrew isn't going to react to her presence either, because he would recognise that, assuming he remembered who she was, and there's a possibility that he might not, after all, he's met lots and lots of people who are mediocre in nature, at least from his perspective, then even if he did recognise who she was, his narcissism would cause him to ignore her in order to avoid his own potential exposure by recognising who she is. Indeed, it would be more strange for him to know who she was than the other way around. Accordingly, it's clear that there was a prior involvement between Andrew and this one's wife, not one born out of his general fame and not born out of the fact that this one's wife knew his daughter, but the fact that those two must have met previously. And, given the rumours circulating about her yacht girl days, the most logical conclusion would be that there has been some kind of introduction between the two surrounding that whole world. Now, it doesn't necessarily follow that there had been intimacy between the two. It could just be that they met in the circumstances of on a yacht, and neither wanted to admit that that had happened for reasons which I needn't go into. Or it could well be that intimacy had taken place, and again, neither would want to admit that they knew each other beforehand for the reasons that I've already articulated. But the fact that she does something stupid, like suggesting that she doesn't know who Prince Andrew is, when all of the evidence points to the fact that she must have known who she is demonstrative of the need of the narcissist to nullify and maintain control, which can only lead to the conclusion that she already knew Andrew and didn't want the circumstances of their prior meeting, be it just on a yacht or wherever it might have been, or even if intimacy had occurred, being exposed, because it would threaten her control over Harry. Accordingly, by understanding her narcissism and its need for control, we understand that her and Andrew did know one another in some capacity, whether it was simple introduction in circumstances that neither would want exposed, or something more saucy and potentially spicy. But either way, they knew one another before they actually met at the Royal Lodge. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.